All right. Aloha mai kako. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Transfer Tuesday webinar series. We are super excited to have you. My name is Amy McKee. I am the Manoa Transfer Specialist and Coordinator of the KEA program for Leeward Community College. With me today are my colleagues Lori Labarios and Jordan Luton from Leeward Community College. Lori, did you want to do the slide or should I do the slide?
Sure. So our agenda today is we'll be hearing from American Studies, Dr. Jeffrey Tripp, also from UH Mānoa History Department, Dr. Kieko Mattison, and from our Political Science Department, Dr. Jairus Groves. So they are going to speak about their respective programs from UH Mānoa and share information with you as you're considering transferring to beautiful UH Mānoa.
So before we get started, we just wanted to share with you folks a little bit more information about UH Manoa. The University of Hawaii at Manoa was founded in 1907 and is considered a land, sea, space, and sun grant institution. We offer over 100 undergraduate majors for students to choose from, as well as many graduate and professional degrees, including law, medicine, business, social work, education, and engineering. We are the flagship campus in the University of Hawaii system, a highly ranked Research One institution, NCAA Division I school, and we strive towards being a native Hawaiian place of learning. If you are thinking about transferring to UH Manoa within the next 1 to 2 years, we'd love for you to consider joining the KEAEA program. The KEAEA program is a partnership between UH Manoa and the community colleges, and we have transfer specialists at each of the campuses to provide proactive academic advising to its students. Additional benefits you get within the program is the waiver of the application fee, option to take UH Manoa classes before you transfer, and early registration when you start at Manoa. If you would like to join the program, it is free and open to any UH Community College student. You need to have at least 24 transferable credits, a 2.0 GPA, and have at least one more semester before you transfer to Manoa. I'll put the link in the program, and if you're interested, please message me in the chat.
So Jairus is from the Political Science Department at UH Mānoa, and I'd like to introduce him right now. Go ahead, Jairus.
Great, thank you. Well, first, everyone watching or who will be watching in the future, welcome to our campus if you've already transferred, and if you haven't, do it. So I'm not going to try to make a case for why political science in particular, but I will try to make a case for what we have to offer. I mean, I think one of the best pieces of advice that I can give to students, even transfer students who are sort of further along, is that there's a real value in a liberal arts degree, like American Studies or history or political science, precisely because it's not a technical degree. It's not trying to teach you a skill yet. It's trying to give you the resources you need for making sense of the world and working through it. And so for me, you need to find the major that inspires you the most, and you can use that then to develop the ability to read critically, and that means really hard books, really disorienting media barrages, the ways in which we are given information in the contemporary world, but also historically. That you take that and you learn how to write in a voice that's uniquely yours and fiercely effective. That is a very, very, very difficult skill to develop. And I think one of the most important things you can do as an undergrad is to give you the confidence to write in your own voice in a way that you can use in multiple settings. And the reality is, whether or not you go into engineering, the biosciences, law, business, whatever it is, the ability to write clearly and effectively in a way that is you is much more important than I think having a specific skill set. And the last one, and it's something that's important and sort of dear to my heart, and I think influences maybe the way that we teach a bit, but I know American Studies and history as well, is that you be able to formulate an argument. And that's actually very different than an opinion. It's the ability to understand the sort of causal and logical links between events, why they happened, how they happened, what they meant, and to draw on multiple sources for trying to understand those events. So that you don't just have one position, even if you're someone who's personally experienced it. And to formulate that in a way, both through writing and also in oral communication, that allows you to stake that ground and engage in debate, and to to try to make your case in a way that can be persuasive to other people. And so find that major that allows you to develop those skills, because either mere knowledge or sort of technical skills, right, if they're not connected, they're not going to do very much for you. So how do we try to do that in political science? The first is that I think we do not take a very scientific approach to political science. And what I mean by that is that we're not a very quantitative driven department in the way that, say, the department at the University of Michigan is. We do also do quantitative work, but the emphasis in our department is to look at the distribution of power in society. Or to put it as Howard Laswell said in the 1940s, politics is who gets what, when, and how. We want to understand why there are winners and losers in political systems, whether or not those are forced choices. We want to understand how politics happens in farmlands and decisions about what to plant, and the political economy of subsidies that determine what kinds of food are available to us, as much as we want to understand who wins presidential elections. And so we take power on as our kind of central focus point for research, and we try to find it everywhere. That means that we have classes in Hawaiian politics, we have classes on terrorism and international security, we have classes on fascism and the rise of new populist movements and what they look like historically. We focus on emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, other major changes that may or may not be disruptive. They may be unprecedented, or they may be nothing at all. We have a lot of classes on media, both in terms of how new media functions, how social networks produce meaning, how they produce opinions, as well as sort of more traditional questions about how popular culture functions informing politics. And then we have a strong history and emphasis in the foundations of political philosophy, where the sort of major concepts like power or the state or representation or recognition, how those concepts play into our political imaginaries and what we think is and isn't possible politically. And so those big questions inform all of our specializations, and I'll go through those. But I just think it's important to think about, you know, are those the kinds of questions you want to ask? And you'll see already there's a lot of overlap, I think, between the three departments, but that's sort of where we place ourselves. And the last thing is that we always attempt to try to connect the local with the global. So I think part of making Hawaii matter as a place and as a history and as a people, in the ways that we talk about questions of power, is understanding that we can't extract ourselves from this place. And we also can't ignore the fact that this place is part of the Pacifica more largely, but also the global, right? We're at the intersection of US empire. We're at the intersection of the US economy, even if it has to go to California first. Find about all of that and why your milk costs 3 times as much as it should. Or also why, you know, at different times, this place can seem very far away, and sometimes that's a good thing. And then, you know, for the 30 minutes you're sitting on your bathroom floor waiting to see if there's a nuclear bomb that's about to go off, it can seem very, very small. And we cover the whole gambit. And I think even in our classes on global politics, we're never going to allow students to try to escape to one of those spaces. We're always going to try to think what we call transversally, right, across the local and the regional and the global. So that's what we're up to. Here are our sort of major areas. We have particular expertise and faculty who specialize in Indigenous politics, mostly focusing on Hawaiian politics, but also more broadly, and in fact, how Hawaiian politics fits in with the larger Indigenous revivals that are happening all over the world, and what resurgence means as opposed to merely surviving, and how those kinds of movements are linking up with Palestinian struggles and struggles around the world. In fact, we had an amazing undergrad, I'll talk about Europe sort of later down below, but who did an incredible undergraduate thesis on comparing the struggles in Tibet with the struggles in Hawaii, and then where she was Dene, and from New Mexico, and thinking about how differently Indigenous, what that means, and how states react to it, and really also comparatively, and this is something we also do, is thinking about what institutions do differently. So, you know, the United States being a sort of roughly Republican institution, meaning it's representative, not direct democracy, as compared to China, which is mostly authoritarian, and really trying to understand what that meant for the struggles on the ground and resisting oftentimes forms of political violence. And what was fascinating about her project is finding out a great deal about how similar states are when it comes to security, even when we think of them as radically different institutionally. When it comes to oppressing, rounding up, and constraining people, reservations look a lot alike all over the world. I really enjoyed actually supervising that one. The next big area, which is also reflective of our graduate program, is political futures. We don't just like to study the things that have already happened. We like to study the things that haven't happened yet, and think about what that means for trying to understand how power could change, right? So looking at new technologies of surveillance and emerging technologies of automation, what that'll do to the future of the labor force, but also to warfare and questions of security. We have a core focus area in what's called global politics. That's inclusive of two traditional internet or sort of political science subfields. One is international relations, which looks at the kinds of politics that happen in between states, and comparative politics, which tends to look at the way that the internal politics of states differ and as a result change the institutions that they are. So what does it mean to be a parliamentary democracy as opposed to a representative democracy? What does it mean to be an authoritarian state or an oligarchy or a state dominated by, I don't know, 5 corporations? What kinds of differences do those make? And then we want that to give you a sense for how that shapes the world that you live in and the kinds of options that exist there. We have a law and society concentration, which also has an undergraduate certificate option. That isn't just to prepare you for law school, although that is true. A lot of people use that to go to law school. It's also to understand the way that legal orders shape your everyday existence. How the legal regimes around, say, disability or race politics alter what isn't politically feasible, as well as giving you some of the basis and background for both understanding domestic law, so the kind of constitutional structures that exist in the United States, but also how those differ globally. What does it mean that the United States is a constitutional institution as opposed to a common law institution like the United Kingdom? What does it mean to have, you know, a Supreme Court that can strike down as opposed to merely giving advice, et cetera, et cetera? And so we have constitutional law classes where you'll learn things like how to brief in major constitutional cases. We also have classes in environmental law, both in the domestic level and the way that environmental global law, or sort of international law, is developed through the United Nations and various treaties that have done everything from restrict where you can dump nuclear waste to how we protect endangered species. We still have a focus, which I think has been sort of renewing recently in public policy. Some of you may have seen that Larry Nitz, one of our public policy professors, was widely covered in Star Advertiser and a lot of other newspapers for publishing a report on how many restaurants we're likely to lose as a result of COVID. And it was quite depressing to find out that like 60% of Hawaiian restaurants thought they might not be able to open back up. But I think one of the things that's important in political science is that's not where the research stopped. That's just where it began. So the question was why, right? It engaged in different kinds of qualitative methods that we teach, from interviewing people who had participated in the survey to dig deeper and find out where it was that the state of Hawaii was failing local business owners in developing the capacities and the resilience to wait out the storm of COVID so that they wouldn't get so quickly replaced by, you know, easy companies that can swoop in afterwards from the mainland. The last area, I think, is one which is incredibly important, which is political theory. This is where we really study the foundations of why power is so significant in politics, why it's not enough to just understand the economy or to just understand culture or to just understand technology. You have to understand the ways in which groups become, in some cases, antagonistic or see their interests or what they need as coming, in some sense, as sort of a zero sum where they're competing with one another. And, you know, I think one of the areas which we're much stronger in, I think, than most other universities who do political theory, is we really want to think about those as comparative questions as well. It's not Plato and everybody else. It's also thinking about Islamic and Chinese traditions of political theory, thinking about indigenous traditions of political theory and governance, and understanding how particular ideas about politics became the dominant ideas of politics, and which ones have been left out and what that really means. And that's, I think, an exciting area. We have a number of capstones for the department, which I think is always a good question to ask. What way do you want to build your degree into a kind of culminating experience? So we have legislative and community internships, and our internship program both includes the state of Hawaii and Washington, D.C. We've even made some of those work during COVID, but certainly it'll get a little easier after. We have a teacher mentor program, which allows you to do your capstone by being a teaching assistant in a class. And that ranges from learning how to grade to how to give lectures in class, how to run discussion groups, really dig in and think about if you would like to go on to teach, either at the high school or elementary level, or if you'd like to go on to be a professor, to really have that experience firsthand. And so you work closely with a faculty member over the course of a full semester to do that. We also have a senior thesis option, this sort of more traditional paper where you can work with a student or work with a faculty member. And that's also where I think a lot of our Europe students have taken their opportunity. Again, we've had people who've traveled all over the world. We've had people who've stayed here. We had a really fascinating student not too long ago that spent all of his time and his Europe money reconstructing the top secret insurgency and counterinsurgency programs in Vietnam, which had recently been declassified. He was the child of foreign service parents and had always heard stories about what these things were, and wrote one of the best papers I've read on how the Phoenix program used, and this was fascinating to me, vaudeville actors to undermine the North Vietnamese army. So people who could throw their voices, who could dress up as ghosts to literally haunt the other military personnel in hopes that that would undermine their capacity to fight. It was fascinating. So we, in addition to those, we have the ability for students to take a graduate seminar, which I think for those people who are interested in graduate school, it's a great way to get undergraduate credit, fulfill your capstone, and have a kind of experience of what a graduate seminar is really like. The faculty members work with you to make the expectations more reasonable for an undergrad student. So normally the papers are much shorter. The sort of expectations for performance are very different, but it still gives you a sense of what it's like to be in a room filled with PhD and master's students, having a level of discussion and sort of the analytic abilities that you need to develop to really understand very technical and sometimes hard texts. The last one we have a senior seminar. That's sort of run as a graduate seminar, but with all undergraduate students. This is also a moment where we really try to get you on the way out to really think about your writing skills. So when I taught the senior seminar, one of the books we read was called How to Write a Sentence by Stanley Fish. And we had a greatest hits list of the best sentences we'd ever read. And then what made them so good? And while that sounds like the kind of question you'd normally ask in a sort of an English class or a comp lit class, those are all great places to ask them. But when you're really trying to develop a voice in your area of expertise, or you're thinking about wanting to move on, taking that back up again, right? And sort of defamiliarizing how confident you think you are in your writing, and then building a little bit further, I think it's a great way to end the program. For those who never want to end, we have a BA/MA program known as BAM, because I guess Bama would seem like we had mixed alliances. The BAM program will allow you, and it's a little bit quick for transfer students, but not impossible, to do your BA and MA together in an accelerated time frame. It allows you to count a limited number of undergraduate or graduate classes sort of against each other, the details of which are on our website. You should check them out. But it's a great opportunity for people to basically spend one extra year. That's what it amounts to, sort of 1 to 1.5, and leave with a master's degree, and really go on to what you want to do next, feeling like you got literally everything you could get out of our department. We have some other opportunities that I wanted to raise. One is that we have an award for the best transfer student every semester. It's not a lot of money. It's only $500. But it's a way for us to really recognize that it's a lot of work to move from a community college to a research university. The expectations are different. If you're a first generation college student, you may not be familiar with all of those. It's a new community. It's a massive campus. It can be quite alienating. And this is our sort of small way of hoping to build a kind of mentorship community across transfer students. So you get the award, and then of course, we have our hands out to ask you for something, which is that we ask you to go once a semester, just for the time that you get the award, back with us to one of the community colleges, or to participate online with one of the community colleges, so that you can answer questions for community college students and transfer students who just want to talk to somebody who's actually been through the experience directly. So it's not just us making promises that we're not actually cruel, and we won't lock your stuff up and play pranks on you, haze you, etc. We also have a colloquium series, which we encourage all undergraduates to participate in. While they tend to be visiting faculty members from other universities, we also set aside at least one colloquia per semester for sort of big questions. And actually right now I'm going to copy into the chat box, which hopefully everyone can see, our most recent one, which was a number, oh, that's Pi Sigma Alpha. Hold on one second. We did a colloquia on the January 6th coup attempt in DC. And hopefully that, if you're interested, it will give you a sense of the ways in which we try to take up contemporary questions, and also how we try to include students in that. And so in that case in particular, because it was set aside for this, we only answered the undergraduate student questions. So all the faculty members and community members had to get at the back of the line. So yeah, so we also have an honor society, which is what I accidentally pasted before, which is Pi Sigma Alpha. Pi Sigma Alpha was obviously more involved before COVID, but they're still doing events. They are also, we provide them support to have like pizza movie nights and some other things to organize around political questions, also public debates. And we participate as well, but at their request as opposed to ours. And it's a student-led and student-run opportunity, I think, to do some really interesting work in politics, and also I think it adds a lot to the overall conversation in the department. I think that's also one of the major areas of strength, is that because we have such a large graduate program right now, we have 93 master's and PhD students in the program. We have a really serious and diverse community that ranges from Hawaiian activists that were chained to cattle guards on Mauna Kea, to captains and lieutenant colonels in the Air Force and Army, to second and third career people who've left the Foreign Service and are coming back to do PhDs, to people who are right out of undergrad, who are helping teach some of our classes, that are mentoring undergraduate students, and I think generally providing a very open environment where we like to think that everyone's treated as a colleague rather than as a student. Unfortunately, the union will no longer allow us to have undergraduates vote on hiring decisions. But I would just like to say that historically, in the political science department, undergraduates were able to participate fully in all department meetings and had voting rights. Those have recently been stripped, and by recently I mean last 10 years. But I think it's actually still very much part of our culture. We want everyone who's in the department to be part of the department, and that's not just at the sort of receiving end of information and knowledge. So I'll leave it there, and then any questions that people have, I'd be happy to answer, and I can talk a little bit about the requirements. Yeah.
Can you talk about the online shift and how that's looking in the future going forward?
Sure. I personally think that online courses are a necessary evil, but not a virtue. And what I mean by that is that we are doing everything that we can to make online education better, because we want to be able to serve the other islands in particular, beyond what travel, resources, and rent make possible. So we are always going to have some core component of online coursework available. And that includes everything from departmental events to classes. So, you know, the colloquia, even before COVID, are online. People can ask questions from online. We try to do things which allow full participation. I don't think we'll ever have an online degree. And that has a lot to do with the technology just not quite being there yet to fully develop the kinds of oral skills that we expect for someone coming out of political science, as well as the really hard work of learning to write. We actually have a writing seminar at the 200 level. It's a 1 hour credit. It's a very short class, but that's exactly how much time most people can bear to only work on writing. And I think, you know, those kinds of capacities will always be in person for us, at least for now. We offer a lot of courses online during the summer. We offer classes through Extension as well as online during the semester. And I think, you know, I mean, just to give an example, we've tried to make that work when it's necessary, as best we can. Right now, all but 3 of our classes are online. We have a couple of blended classes that are hybrid. But I think as soon as humanly possible, we're likely to get back to being majority in person. However, we do make an effort to try to offer courses and offer opportunities for students to take classes throughout the day. And that also, I think, is important as you're getting sort of towards the end of your degree. And one of the reasons why we also let students into the graduate courses as undergrads is that, you know, we want people to be able to have lives and schedules and to be able to complete the degree, but also take classes they want to take, even if their schedules are a little insane. So it's a process.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other
Thank
questions?
you so much, Jared.
Sure.
There's a comment from Lolly in the chat if you want to read that. Doesn't seem like there's a question in there though.
Okay.
Or like a hope that there might be a online BA in political science degree in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great if there were. You know, I think, I mean, as the person directing the Future Center, it's sort of crazy to think that we would always be, you know, analog and face-to-face. And given we're probably likely to have, you know, over the course of our lifetimes, at least 4 or 5, if not more, interruptions like COVID, I do think that we'll work on more and more platforms for that to be possible, but it's not likely to happen soon. That being said, we have a lot of students who are full-time parents and working full-time, and we work with them to make those schedules work. You know, I mean, even when, you know, like just as an example, we had a student, Priya, who's actually at the law school now, who got an amazing internship, but not through the internship program, but in DC at exactly the wrong time to finish her degree. And we figured out how to make sure she could take the degree partially online and finish it when she got back. And, you know, we try to accommodate those things the best that we can. I think the problem is, we don't yet have the resources. And I think a lot of departments really don't have the resources yet to give you the same experience online, or what we think of as the same rigorous experience online that you would get in person. And so we're going to, I think, drag a little bit because we are picky that you get what you pay for. And, you know, if we could just double the bandwidth and then also maybe lower the median age of our department by 10 or 15 years, we'll get there. But that'll be a slow process. So I hope, you know, I hope you don't wait for an online degree. It's a great reason to reach out to our undergraduate advisor, who's Nevi Sojuk, or to reach out to myself, or to our chair. I mean, we've had students complete degrees doing everything, going to war, getting over war, raising families, having kids, dealing with partners and care issues. It's a department, you know, I always bring this up, you know, we had 2 kids in the department. Our kids were always welcome as faculty, and our students' kids have always been welcome in the department too. Kathy Ferguson, who used to be the chair, famously was in the middle of a presentation and nursed her son through the presentation, finishing it, not leaving the podium. And she's an all-star. So like, that's the kind of department we always want to have. So, you know, don't wait for your life to get easier. Figure out if there's a way for us to make the department a place where you feel welcome no matter what your schedule is.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that. That's really inspiring. And also to Lolly, I've worked with students who, you know, we've kind of pieced it together to make it online. Like, even though it's not billed as an online degree, like we, as Jared said, if you work with your advisors, if you work with the faculty,
yeah,
we can make it work.
Yeah. Save classes for particular times when you do think you'll have the time, right? I mean, we can be creative. So I don't ever take one of our answers as sort of the final word on what you think is and isn't possible, please.
I have a question about the BAM program. I noticed
Sure.
Political science was one of the first departments to jump on board. Have you folks had many students go through with the BAM?
I mean, not a ton, but I think we're on student number 5 right now. So we're doing pretty well. We have 3 more applicants this year. You know, I think that the BAM program is an excellent opportunity. However, there are many instances where finishing earlier and just applying to the master's program is as good an option as doing BAM. So if you look at BAM, you're like, oh gosh, I can't figure out how to make this timing work, because it really assumes a particular sequence of courses at a particular stage, and that's not always great for transfer students. Don't think that that means that you couldn't do a BA and an MA in almost the same amount of time here at UH Mānoa. So again, that's a good reason to reach out and talk to me as the graduate chair, and I can take a look at your STAR report and see the classes you have, and we can talk through whether or not you should just plow through and end with an MA, or if you should take advantage of the BAM program. I mean, the BAM program can save you a little bit of money, and I think that's the real value of it, is it allows for some double counting, and you don't have to worry about having to reapply, and that certainly is easier. But it's not the only way to pull that off in that amount of time, and I think still get quite a bit from the program. So.
Thank you so much. Well, I know we're coming up to our time. So are there any last questions for Jairus or for Dr. Tripp? Actually, hold on. I have one more question for Dr. Tripp. Is American Studies going to get a BAM one day?
At this point, I'm not sure. That would be, yeah, ideal if we could, but to be honest, I'm not sure at this point.
No worries. Yeah, I kind of have mixed feelings about them anyways. Like, as you mentioned, Jairus, you know, some students would do well with just graduating early, applying directly to the MA program, giving themselves a little bit more time to address their question.
I mean, again, for us, it's just having more options, right? We want to have as many options for students as is possible. And I think that's, you know, BAM gives you a little bit of flexibility, but it's not the only way to do it.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'll go ahead and close this out. Thank you so much again for joining us for our first Transfer Tuesday of the spring semester. We will have the recording available shortly, so if you want to share with your friends, that'll be made available soon. And then also feel free to join us for our next workshop. It's going to be on February 2nd, and it'll have the theater and dance department as well as interdisciplinary studies. We'll stay on if any folks have additional questions, but thank you so much for being here, and hope you have a great day.
Yes, thank you, Jairus and Jeffrey. We really appreciate you helping our transfer students.